We'll start off with Marie-Claire Joyce, Trade Counsellor here at the Embassy for DIT. Comes with an absolute wealth of global experience in all sectors, and Invest Northern Ireland work very closely with Marie-Claire's trade team here at the Embassy. So over to you, Marie-Claire.
Hello everyone, I am Marie-Claire Joyce. I'm the head of trade in DIT Japan, and I'm based in Tokyo at the British Embassy. And I'd like to start by thanking Invest Northern Ireland for inviting me along today to talk to you about the Japanese market and to give you an overview of what DIT does in collaboration with Invest Northern Ireland to support UK companies, and also to explain why now is the time to look at the Japanese market and make a plan for Japan. So let me begin by giving you some facts. Maybe you know them already, but I think it's a useful reminder just how big and important the Japanese market is. So Japan is the world's third largest economy after the US and China. And globally, it is the fifth largest trading nation. And for the UK, outside of the EU and the US and the Chinese market, it's also the UK's largest export market, which means there are significant opportunities for UK companies, just like yours. I think it's also worth noting that, and I didn't actually know this until recently, that Japan has the highest number of millionaires in Asia. Not billionaires, but millionaires. So that just shows you what a lucrative market Japan is. This slide is important, I think, because it tells you two things. I think it shows you the scale of the regional economies in Japan. When you think about Japan, I think you think about Tokyo because it's the capital. And obviously there are massive opportunities in Tokyo and in the second city of Osaka. However, the regional economies of Japan are also really significant, and you should certainly not ignore them. I mean, just looking at this map, you can see the comparison of individual regions compared to particular EU countries. So please do, when you're thinking about Japan, don't just think of Tokyo. Don't just think of Tokyo and Osaka. Also look at the other regions of Japan. And it's worth also saying that, I mean, there are 47 prefectures in Japan. All of them are vying for foreign direct investment. The Japanese government offers lots of different incentives for foreign companies to come to Japan. So you will get all of the help that you need when you are thinking of either exporting, but particularly if you're looking to invest in Japan. So while Japan is undoubtedly a large, stable and advanced economy, I do need to say that English is not universally spoken here. And companies, UK companies and other foreign companies do struggle to find a fully bilingual staff here. Hopefully that will change in the future. I think the Prime Minister Kishida really does realise that. And he is really trying to improve education here and make Japan more open to international companies to come in. It's also worth saying that Japan has its own way of doing things. Things do tend to take longer to do here. And obviously they have a huge domestic market. I mean, the population is twice the size of the UK. So they do have to look at the domestic market first. So if you are looking for a quick win, then the Japanese market is not for you. Things do take time here. Relationships do take time to establish. But if you are prepared to put the time and the effort into it, I can assure you, and many other companies who have succeeded here can also reassure you that it will be worth it and you will reap the rewards. So let's look at Japanese consumers. Japan has a large, rich and highly educated market. and they are definitely early adopters of the newest, the products and the services that come onto the market. Everyone, whether they are young or elderly, has a mobile phone, for example. They're always looking for the latest apps, for the latest technology, for the latest gadgets. They love their their hobbies. They can appear as a little nerdy to foreigners, but they are the prime audience for the latest tech. And it's important to realize that attention to detail is essential in Japan, and it's not just what's inside the package. The packaging is just as important. And I've seen many companies who have made mistakes with their packaging, whether it's been in size or colors or the writing on it, and they've had to redo it, or perhaps it's arrived in market and it's been damaged, and they've had to return it because they certainly can't sell it to Japanese consumers, because they really do demand first class and very high quality products. So I'm sure you're all wondering what effect has COVID had on Japan. And like elsewhere in the world, COVID has had a significant impact on Japan, and Japan is still in a difficult position economically. It was, Japan, if you've tried to even book tickets to Japan or look to see whether it's been possible, until October this year, it wasn't actually possible to come to Japan, either as a tourist or as a business person, unless you were Japanese or you had family here and could ask for exemption. So Japan was actually the last G7 country to open its borders, and those strict border controls have had a really brutal effect on the economy. And also a weak yen, that's been exacerbating rising cost of living, and economic recovery, like elsewhere in the world, is proving to be quite slow. However, I think now is the time. It is open, and Japan has opened completely. Trade fairs are starting again. Trade missions are starting to come into Japan. So it feels like a really exciting time to be starting to look at Japan. I think it's worth saying that of the sectors that have been affected by COVID, the hospitality and consumer sectors in particular have been impacted. The government didn't, implement a lockdown like in the UK or other places in the world. They had a series of states of emergency where bars and hotels, restaurants were told to close early. But the impact that it had actually was that consumers stopped going out completely and stayed at home. And so things have changed. And it will take, time for Japanese consumers, I think, to pick up their usual habits. And as you all know, the Olympics, the Tokyo Olympics 2020, was postponed for a year. But the fact that did take place in 2021, and Japan is now looking to hold its first expo. Sorry, not its first expo, but its first expo for for over 30 years in Osaka in 2025, just shows that things really are opening up in Japan, and it feels a lot more normal. So let me say a little bit about the socio-political factors. Japan is a stable place to do government. The links between the UK and Japan are very strong. Japan is the UK's closest partner in Asia, and Japanese people really do love the UK. So you will be welcomed here because you are from the UK. The ex-Prime Minister Abe put some really strong structural policies in place, which are still very much in place today. So let me say a little bit about the business environment. So I think the key things to remember when doing business with Japanese companies is that, just as I said for consumers, they do have high expectations and high demands. They will be very punctual, and they will expect you to be punctual as well. When you enter into communication with them and to start that relationship, they will also expect that if you are serious about doing business with them, that you will maintain that communication. And during the pandemic, I think it's fair to say that it's been very difficult for companies who are new to the Japanese market to start those relationships. Companies who already had existing relationships have been able to continue those online, by email, Teams, Zoom, etc. But actually, because there has been that lack of in-person contact, it's been more difficult to forge those relationships. So I really would, encourage you to come to Japan, whether that's through Invest Northern Ireland, through a trade mission, or visiting a trade fair, or coming with a DIT support package, and meeting Japanese companies face to face, because it's then that you can actually start to forge that relationship. There is lots of support available through JETRO, as I said, through DIT, and also the Japanese government has lots of incentives because they really do want to attract more foreign companies into Japan. So let's look at some of the top opportunities. As you can see on the slide, there are a number of sectors, and actually it's no coincidence that these sectors are also the priorities that the DIT trade team in Japan has chosen to focus on for the next 3 years. 2 years ago, the UK signed the first FTA, the Free Trade Agreement, which is often known as CEPA, with Japan. It was the first FTA that was signed since the UK left the European Union, and I think it's no coincidence as well that actually the UK chose Japan to be its first FTA partner. That FTA, which is a continuation of the FTA that the EU signed with Japan a few years earlier, it enables UK companies to benefit from lots of reduction in tariffs, but other new benefits as well. And I really would encourage you to look at the gov.uk website to find out more about those benefits. But it's because of this CEPA, because of this agreement, that I think now is the time to look at Japan. And we've already seen a lot of companies looking at, particularly at the sectors of life sciences. There's a huge need in Japan for offshore wind. Japan is also, like many other countries in the world, trying to reduce its dependence on Russian energy resources, so it's looking for new sources of energy. And the UK is really well placed to offer a very high level of expertise. Other sectors like technology, of AI, smart cities and cyber, as well as food and drink, financial and professional service as well. These are sectors that Japan needs the UK capability, and therefore they present significant opportunities for UK companies. So what does DIT Japan do? So in the British Embassy here in Tokyo, we actually have the 3 devolved administrations on our platform. So we have Invest Northern Ireland, we have Scottish Development International, SDI, and we also have the Welsh Government. And we work really well, hand in glove, with the devolved administrations. So what do we do together? So sometimes we will do trade fairs together, trade missions, but also we will attend each other's meetings. We will share market intelligence and information about the markets. If we are contacted by a Northern Irish company, then we will talk to the Invest Northern Ireland team and decide who is best placed to help them. If we have a stand at a trade fair, such as the food and drink one for Foodex, we will offer space to Northern Irish companies. So it really is a very collaborative relationship. DIT supports and helps companies all over the UK with the Japanese market. We do that through various different ways. We can do market research, we can organise trade missions or visits to market. We can, when ministers come, we will set up programmes. And also we deal with a lot of what we call the market access barriers. So if companies, and this goes for companies throughout the UK, are finding that there are technical barriers to trade, or there are issues that they find when they are exporting to Japan, if they can let us know, then we can raise these through various channels with the Japanese government. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that you found my presentation useful, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.